The Evercade is home to a ton of amazing beat 'em ups with some really heavy hitters like Final Fight, the Double Dragon series, and even the recently announced Battletoads arcade game. As awesome as these games are, there are also several beat 'em ups that you probably never heard of and would never have known about if not for the Evercade. Let's take a look at a few of these obscure beat 'em ups that are a lot of fun to play. Our first game on the list is Water Margin, a game that started out as an unlicensed Taiwan release and can be found on Pico Interactive Collection 1. That is currently a legacy cart and it is really expensive, but you can still buy this game on Steam for $11 and it goes on sale pretty often, so you can get it for cheaper if you're patient. The game draws heavy, and I mean heavy, inspiration from Capcom's Knights of the Round. You get 3 playable characters, each with a different weapon and attributes, all that play like one of the knights. You have this guy with blue hair who plays just like Arthur with similarly balanced attributes, while the fast female character is clearly inspired by Lancelot, and finally we have the guy with the axe that I'm playing as here, who is the beefy brawler inspired by Percival. The game feels incredibly similar to the Knights of the Round as well. Your character's attacks all have a certain weight to them that will feel immediately familiar to anyone who has played that game. You also get a magic system kind of like Golden Axe, only instead of collecting potions to power up your spells, each icon you find is one spell. You could toggle between these on the fly, but I never found a reason to. They are all pretty powerful and serve the purpose of getting you out of a sticky situation. This is a tough game with a really varied group of enemies that are all really aggressive. They attack you relentlessly and can easily knock you out of the air. The good news is you can do the same to them, and your attacks generally interrupt theirs with proper timing. The game has a certain flow to it. When you first start out, you're probably going to get manhandled, but once you figure it out, it becomes really frantic fun. You also can't just play on the easy difficulties, as the game's endings are locked behind the higher difficulties. I really enjoyed this game. It actually was the first Evercade game I ever played, as I was lucky to buy Pico 1 when I first got my EXP, before the prices went through the roof. But it is definitely a beat 'em up worth checking out, and should be easy enough to play on just about any PC. The Legend of Silk Road, found on Pico Arcade Collection 1, is an absolutely fantastic weapons-based beat 'em up and definitely my favorite game on this list. The graphics here are not your typical sprite work. Instead, it has a digitized, almost Mortal Kombat look to it that was popular in the late 90s. I generally prefer sprite work, but this game looks pretty cool, and it has a nice style that sets it apart from most others in the genre. Gameplay here is really solid. You have 3 characters that fall into the archetypes you would expect. You have the big, slow, strong dude, the fast but weak female character, and the middle character who's kind of balanced. The moveset here is really what stands out. You have your standard attack, jump buttons, and a magic button that functions like what you would see in Golden Axe. You collect spells as you go, and you could use each one once. I don't think there's a limit to how many you could store, because when I made it to the final boss, I just spammed the magic I had, and I had a ton because I barely used it throughout the game. Combat here is rock solid. You have your standard things you'd expect, like a grab, attack combo, and jump moves, but underneath your life bar, you also have a special meter, which could be spent to use special moves triggered by various button inputs. The special meter is pretty long and refills as you do standard attacks, so while you cannot spam your specials infinitely, they are there when you need them if you play smart. My favorite of the 3 characters was the balanced one. He could throw a fireball by doing a Hadouken motion, a charge slash by pressing back, forward, and attack, and an upward Shoryuken kind of slash that could be triggered by pressing down, up, then attack. The addition of these added a lot to the gameplay. They were extremely useful for taking down bosses and dealing with crowds. They could also be worked into your regular combos for some of the harder enemies that interrupt your standard attack strings. Play is divided into 7 worlds. It took me about 45 minutes to beat the game, and there are some branching paths to explore as well. There are some good dip switch settings here as well, including 5 different difficulties. I played on the easiest setting, and the game felt pretty balanced, and did not fall into the quarter munching trap that arcade games often do. The Legend of Silk Road is a fantastic, unheard of game that's definitely worth a playthrough, and is the kind of game I will revisit over and over again. 64th Street, a detective story, can be found on Jellicoe Arcade Collection 1. This is a really fun beat 'em up that I definitely would never have heard of if not for the Evercade. Just like the Super Nintendo version of Final Fight, you play as either Cody or Mayor Mike Hagar. I mean, seriously, look at these two. I understand copying successful games, but at least change the character designs a little bit. I am reasonably sure that no company has been copied to the extent that Capcom has. This game has you embarking on a quest as two detectives trying to rescue a wealthy man's daughter who is kidnapped. So like any good detective, you take to the streets and just punch everyone that you see. Gameplay has the tropes that you are familiar with here. You get some cool weapons, your basic attack combo, jump attacks, special moves that take off life, you know the deal. You also get a grab move, and it is here that the game does something a little different. Like most games of this genre, you could grab enemies to pound on them, then throw them to control crowds. But here, you could also throw them up into the background. This is just such a fun mechanic, as throwing them into the background destroys objects and deals extra damage to them. There is even some really cool levels where you can take advantage of this to throw enemies to their death. Like the water level where the background is just the water and you could chuck enemies to their death, and the level that has you riding a train where you could just throw them off. I always think this is such a fun mechanic in games like this. It's a small, subtle change to the tried and true formula, but it adds enough to keep it fun and a little different. Outside of that, this game is a fairly competent beat 'em up that is a bit of a hidden gem. The bosses here are kind of a low point and fall into the category of cheap enemies designed to eat quarters. It doesn't really matter when you're playing for free, but it's kind of annoying. But now that we have dip switch settings, turning down the difficulty makes these bosses much more bearable. That aside, this is a really fun game that nails the basics and introduces a unique mechanic to set it a little bit apart from its inspirations. Just Hero is a game from Mega Cat Collection 1. It is one of those games that gets an extremely bad rap from the Evercade community. Generally, when people talk about this game, it is done in an extremely negative way, but it is pretty solid if you give it a chance. I get why the game gets criticized. It starts out with you in a little hub world where you can access a shop and all of the game's levels. And as soon as you enter one of the levels, you run into some enemies, and here's where the criticisms begin. You have a punch, kick, and jump kick. Pretty standard for a game like this. The issue is you lack the ability to do combos. When you punch or kick an enemy, they become invincible for a second. So if you try to follow up with another one, they're gonna hit you. Combat becomes a game of hit and run while spamming jump kicks and any weapons you find. It is kind of annoying, and I think most people give up on it at this point. Enemies you kill drop money. Once you beat a level, you will have enough money to buy upgrades to your punches or kicks. Once you do that, you are now capable of doing proper combos, and the game feels a lot better, and more in line with what you would expect from a beat 'em up. It probably was not a great design decision to let the player start off without the ability to combo enemies, and that is why so many people view this game negatively. But get past that, and it's a pretty fun game. Nothing revolutionary, but the levels are fun. The game has a good sense of humor with some quirky enemy bosses and dialogue. It's a good time. You even get to fight a Battletoad, complete with the racer from the Turbo Tunnel. Maybe a bit on the simple side, but still an enjoyable playthrough. Given how fantastic Mega Cat Collection 1 is, there are plenty of other reasons to buy this card. And once you do, give this game a chance. You gotta get past the slow start, but I think it's worth playing for fans of 8-bit beat 'em ups. The final game on this list, and definitely the weirdest, is a game called Knuckle Bash, found on Toaplan Arcade 4. This is a game heavily inspired by wrestling. You pick from 3 characters, each with a variety of attack combos and grapples. As you play, you unlock 2 more. This is cool, as you can switch characters every time you die, but also kind of stinks, as the 2 unlockable characters are both really fun, and you can't play as them from the start. Play is a little different than your standard beat 'em up. Rather than long scrolling stages, play usually takes place in an arena with a designated number of enemies. Beat them and you move on to the next stage. There are lots of boss battles in this game. These are typically really colorful opponents inspired by the wackiest parts of pro wrestling. It's a fun game with pretty frantic combat. There are definitely a lot of moves, but I couldn't figure out how to do many of them. My character would just randomly do things that I often could not replicate, so it definitely is more to the combat than I figured out on my first playthrough. It's a pretty short game. It took me a little over 20 minutes to blow through it my first time, but it was fun, and it's just so weird, it's something you should experience. Toaplan Arcade 4 is such a solid card. It is worth a purchase regardless of how you feel about this game, but it's just such a quirky time that fans of beat 'em ups definitely need to try.